In the early days, you build Frankenstein approaches. You bring on tools, you start in a spreadsheet, you go here, you build your own tool for this, you cobble things together, and all bets are off. You can use whatever you want to get the job done. And then in larger companies, you've inherited all those systems. It's not a priority. You need to hit your revenue goals. You need to move along this journey, and no one wants to stop and deal with the housekeeping. Oh, how do you get out of it? You don't. Like, you really just have to, have really brave leaders who are willing to stop. You're just going to end up like behind all your competitors, and just try and make the point regularly of what that person's value is to revenue in other ways. I hate when RevOps is just working on reporting. That's not the job of RevOps, right? And that's not the job of, and just like cleaning up systems and context, that's not the job.
What's up, everyone? Today we have the pleasure of chatting with Jenna Kellner, VP of Marketing at WorkLeap. In this episode, we cover how to prioritize tech debt, how to persist through broken systems and imperfect data, why first principles matter more than tools, how to build business judgment in technical marketing roles, and why confidence without humility is dangerous. All that and a bunch more stuff after a quick word from two of our awesome partners. This episode is brought to you by our friends at Knack. I have the amazing pleasure of chatting with some of the greatest minds in marketing operations, but you'd be shocked at how many of them have the same issues when it comes to their campaign creation process. They're dealing with things like scaling, personalization, keeping assets on brand, render testing emails, working in rigid templates, and worst of all, having to hand code emails. But many of the leaders in the space are using Knack to eliminate these headaches. Knack is a no-code email and landing page creation platform that covers initial campaign requests right until the sync to your marketing automation platform. Knack improves the whole campaign creation process by bringing the building, optimization, testing, collaboration, and also translation functions all in a single spot. So you don't have to jump around and coordinate feedback between a bunch of different people or wait on developers for very simple edits. Because at the end of the day, marketing ops folks want to focus on process and efficiency. Marketers want to focus on creativity, and Knack makes sure you get both and then some. Check them out at knack.com. That's Knak, and tell them we sent you. This episode is brought to you by MoEngage and their new warehouse native CEP, which revolutionizes the way data should be seamlessly fetched, analyzed, and activated. Now you can use MoEngage Cloud Data Sync to sync your warehouse data with MoEngage and use it to segment audiences or personalize messages without any development. Just set and forget. Use MoEngage warehouse segments to create segments on your warehouse data without moving underlying events, properties, or proprietary segmentation logic, and activate them directly on MoEngage. Using warehouse data analytics, brands can also directly generate insights from their warehouse data. Your long search solution for seamless data sync, smarter segmentation, dynamic personalization, and delightful customer experiences ends here. Warehouse native CEP from MoEngage, making it easy, smart, and secure. Learn more at moengage.com. Jenna, thank you so much for your time today. Really excited to chat.
It's so fun to be here. Really appreciate you having me, Phil.
You gave some really good pre-interview answers to some of the topics we chatted about before recording here. And one of my favorite things that you said is that you've never entered an organization where the data felt like it was connected end to end. And I also have never seen this. Like, you do these interviews with companies and like to talk about the tech stack and the tools, or you even see like people post like these really cool flow charts and whiteboards of all the tools you're using. And then you go behind the scenes and it's just like not nearly as sophisticated as they try to say. Is like a lot of duct tape and some like manual systems stitched together there. I'm curious to ask you if you agree here, but like my running theory for why there isn't really a company that has like a perfect tech stack, a perfect data connected all together is that companies are changing all the time. Like whether they're growing or they're not growing fast enough and they're restructuring, like there's new people, there's new teams forming all the time. And people are like adding new tools, new processes for the little part of the funnel or process that they care about. And things like systems, processes, technical debt, like all those things add up over time because like most of the execs don't really care about those things. They don't hit revenue goals. What do you think is the main reason for this? Like, does anyone have their like data stuff together?
Well, first of all, like earmuffs to all my prior and current employers, because you're doing great. Your systems are great. No, in all honesty, big and small, like you sort of face the same problems, right? In the early days, you build Frankenstein approaches. You bring on tools, the things that you're working, you start in a spreadsheet, you go here, you build your own tool for this, you cobble things together, and all sort of bets are off. You can use whatever you want to get the job done in the early days of a company, right? And then in larger companies, like let's skip ahead, many years or many rounds and all that, you've inherited all those systems, but you don't grow out of all of them at the same time because they're not all working in unison. But like you said, you scale too fast. It's not a priority. You sort of just need to get the work done. You need to hit your revenue goals. You need to move along this journey, and no one wants to stop and deal with the housekeeping. It's the same as tech debt. It's the same as sales. Like sales debt exists, right? Sales and marketing debt exists, and this is it. And it's how do you get out of it? You don't. Like you really just have to have really brave leaders, founders, owners, CEOs who are willing to stop. I'm currently working with one of those people who last year just said it's time for us to clean up house because there's never a good time for this. And takes so long. It's so much work, but it is so necessary, and it's very painful in the process. And you want to know why it's not moving faster. We're all hardwired to be like, let's go, like move faster. And you have to Frankenstein around that too while you're waiting, right? Like sales and marketing still needs to report at end of quarter, end of year. We still need to report to the board, all of those things. How do you get that data? You have to Frankenstein an approach. You have to pull 10 different tools together. When I entered one org, a sales leader told me she was literally using 8 different tools to do her weekly reports. My jaw was on the floor. Like, that's poor thing. Like, that's awful. That's not productive. That's the worst use of her time. But no one had the capacity to stop, and no one had raised it enough. Now, I will say, I think it takes intelligent and strong leaders to help prioritize those things for their team members. And it is a bit of a loss of leadership, in my opinion, when you see those bumps that they haven't been addressed, because you're dragging people behind. It's just like when you keep a team member in the team that's not performing. It's the same idea. And so for me, I think it's a leader's job to like move things out of the way and pull the raise the white flag at that moment when you're like, hey, this is hurting us more than it's helping us. We need to clear, we need to make room in the budget. We have to slow down and raise that to identify that to the exec team, the leadership team, whatever the structure is at that time, or the VP or whoever it is, and say it's time. Like, we need to pull the plug here. It's time to invest in this system. We've outgrown it. It's not talking to this system. But, when I was at RBC Ventures, those were massive systems that those took a long time, but you still need that person or that team that's going to bulldoze and say, hey, it's time now to clear the way, and you have to build better. But again, then you start in one thing and then the other one lags behind. So when I was thinking about this, it's kind of like a house. When you plug one hole, you have a leak here, you clear, you think it's going great, and then something else breaks. And it's never going to be perfect, and you can't expect perfect, but you also can't let it go to a state of disrepair, because then, the value of your house is just going to crumble. And so I love analogy, and I think that's a silly one, but maybe it's helpful. And if the person running the house isn't taking care of it, then, it's the same in leadership and management. So I don't know if that fully answers it, but that's how I feel about tech systems. They're never good. You have to Frankenstein your way through them to get the answers you need. But you also need strong leadership of when it's too much or too disorganized and not clean enough, and systems aren't talking and causing other downstream problems.
It's a great answer. I think you're speaking to the core for a lot of listeners' base is marketing operations folks, and they're the ones championing all of those things that are on the backlog that are just tech debt related, they're process related, because people oftentimes will complain to the marketing ops person or the RevOps person that I'm using 8 tools to build this report. It makes no sense. And oftentimes this RevOps person has a bunch of stuff on their list on top of things. And I like your point about it does come down to leadership. At some point we need to just have an understanding of this thing might not lead to revenue tomorrow. It's not a sales campaign that's going to help us hit our quarterly number, but it's going to make everyone's life easier. And I think that, this idea of how do we attach process improvement and tech debt to a revenue number, it's easier said than done. Oftentimes I've been able to say all right, this is not revenue generating today, but here are the like long-term butterfly effect impacts on revenue. But it's hard to do, and sometimes it's super abstract and fluffy, right? Like this person who's spending all this time building a report, jumping in and out of 8 tools. All right, let's figure out a way to quantify the time spent doing that versus how fast it could be. Okay, how much time savings is that? Do we associate that to that person's salary because now they're doing something else? Do we associate to then like that whole discussion about like how do we quantify that? It's a way that
Yeah.
we've been able to prioritize it, but it's hard to do sometimes. Like just doing the thing is faster than trying to quantify it and put a number to it. What are your thoughts there?
I try and stay away from quantifying, to be honest, and just try and make the point regularly of what that person's value is to revenue in other ways, right?
Yeah.
Like I hate when RevOps is just working on reporting. That's not the job of
hmm
RevOps, right?
hmm
And that's not the job of, and just like cleaning up systems and context, that's not the job. The job is to enable sales and marketing to find and to hunt and to do better at their jobs, right? To run better campaigns, to run better sales plays, to be more effective overall, to find patterns, to drive those insights. And later we'll talk about like the business and tech crossover there, but the strongest RevOps folks who can show that value can be like, you're wasting half my day on this when I could be finding patterns and helping you find more sales play, like more insights that would drive better, like, and stronger revenue. So it's tough to make that case, but strong leadership shouldn't need that case. It's just about, okay, here's the time we have these headwinds with us right now. We're at this point in revenue. It's holding us back. Like I hope that you're not like, it's this many hours versus this many hours. That's hard. That's a hard like argument to win because you can't show the proof of future, like better insights and like using your other side of your brain on that. But it's more about timing, I think, and like the factors in your company that say, okay, now is the moment. These are the other things we need to be ready for this, or we're lagging here. And, where was I reading something? I forget the example now. But it's like every time it was in the airline industry. I was reading a really interesting report on like, I'm going to fumble the example, but the airline that like took the time to like overhaul their tech systems. I want to say it was like United. It's like winning 10 times above the other airlines in the US and then each year they can invest whatever 100 million into advancing and the rest are lagging. So if you end up in that situation in like, you didn't pull the plug, you've just been like band-aided, you're just going to end up like behind all your competitors, behind being able to advance systems to like keep up or even get ahead. So I think it just, again, back to strong leadership and knowing like the trade-offs and having been around the block and seen patterns. Again, we'll talk about that, but it's less about knowing exact and more about being able to convince the people around you of the trade-offs that are going to happen.
Yeah, I love it. The other way too is like interdependencies. Like,
Mhm.
oh, this is the project you think is revenue like facing and you want to do this thing. We can't do that until this is solved.
Yeah.
This like data project that we've been backlogging, or now you want to do all these cool things with AI. Like, guess what? Our data quality project that we've been deprioritizing for 2 years. Now we need to do that thing. Like interdependencies is another way to do it. But this whole like tech debt, messy data, frankenstacks, like we all live in it, and there isn't a perfect world where you don't have to deal with some of those things,
Yeah.
but they do lead to problems like imperfect data and tools not talking to each other and having silos of data and people needing to log in and out of
Yeah.
tools to like build a report. You said something that was super cool, like the lack of systems talking to each other and this complexity with like no perfect tech stack. It shouldn't be an excuse to stop making decisions. Most teams like don't have that luxury of waiting for the perfect infrastructure like we just talked about. But I'm curious if you can share like how we should reason through these gaps, these inconsistencies of partial signals when it comes to data. Like a lot of folks will say like, you need to separate directional insights from precision, but how do you know if the direction is accurate if we have no idea how precise the data is in the first place?
Yeah. I mean, everything is unknowable, like you just can't possibly predict everything. And so
Yeah.
you do have to, as a leader, you have to be willing to make decisions and operate. It's like part of the job description without all of the facts. You can try and gather them, You can try and, survey, get as much inputs as you can. But at the end of the day, you regularly have to make calls without the full picture.
Yeah.
Right? You often don't have the luxury. And if you do, you're probably operating too slowly. Right? There are moments where you're so ahead of things, but then the information's probably going to change by the time you get to the finish line. Right? So I think it's, I've entered recently, an org where I really didn't have the data connectivity that I needed to make recommendations quickly, but I didn't really have a choice not to try and figure out how to get it. And I got imperfect data, but I got directional data that was better than no data. Right. And I think that, and then, as the months progressed, the way it's my job also to say and make it very clear, here are the assumptions that we made. Here's the data we're working with. This is what we believe the bet should be. In 3 months, I'm probably going to shift that. And then help my team sort of see that that's okay to operate. And that's part of the startup life. That's part of tech life. That's honestly part of most business. I think I don't know business that's not. You have to operate within those constraints. And then evolve and always be thinking about what could change. How would this be different if I had new information? So think through that. If this proved to be wrong, would I have changed strategy? Would I not? How quickly, and sort of err on that side, on that continuum maybe, and say, and that's how I would make plans and think through those. You can't ever have a perfect picture. And even perfect best systems that are talking together will still sometimes produce results that aren't clean or insights that aren't perfect, right? Because it's all up to the interpreter and how the report was built and who interprets it and what conclusions they're coming to. We all know that in ops and finance and in you can take one set of data and tell one story, and then someone else can tell an entirely different story if they're looking at 3 more columns. So I think that's really important that everyone is looking at it from many lenses when they're looking at data. But in the absence, let's say, of market data or TAM data, or, here's the customer numbers in this market that I'm trying to assess and figure things out, you have to take what you can and make insights based on that. And then try to triangulate it based on your gut, your feelings, the inputs, and then experience of folks on the team. In the absence of those, you sort of just have to put numbers on a wall and hope that those are the right targets or the right numbers. I mean, we're talking so abstractly. My answer would for sure change depending on the type of, goals, targets, numbers we're looking at. But holistically, that's how I would approach it. It definitely makes some people uncomfortable, right? It's hard to operate that way. And sometimes, leaders, CEOs, founders, owners, they want certainty, but they also, they're experiencing good. They know there isn't that certainty. And here are the options, present them with the assumptions and the data behind it. And here's why I think let's go together. Let's hold hands in this decision. And that's a little bit also my leadership philosophy around no one really knows what they're doing, but they're all working with the best info that they have at the time. And as long as you're transparent, over communicative, and clear about those things, then you all go in knowing why you made that decision. And here's the market we're going to, here's the positioning we're going to take this quarter or this year, this, H1, whatever the time frame is, this next 5 years, everything is on a different time frame. But if you're doing it together and you're continuously updating that input, that data, and why you did that, then I think you're in a better position as a leader, as a team, and you might win some and you might lose some, and that's okay, right? You can't get them all. So that's my approach there.
Have you seen, do you think of certain patterns you've seen from folks on your team that maybe are high performers that have continued to progress, despite those constraints, that unperfect world, how we build advantages that aren't dependent on this environment being perfect and being clean all the time? Is it folks that are translating crazy chaos in the tech stack into narratives that other people in the business care about it and can act on? Is it about staying closer to the work as long as possible so you're not too far removed? Is it investing in learning, emotional resilience? What are the things that come to mind when you think of patterns that jump out for people that are effective during those situations?
Yeah, I mean, you touched on a few. Obviously, emotional resilience in the tech world is
Yeah.
important. It's a lot of ping pong of whiplash and ping pong and all that. Even with the best leaders, like market
Hmm.
changes and things have to change. Having the expectation that things will change is critical. Like, every startup says the only change, like constant is change. Like that's true for a reason. The cliches are true. I, the strongest high performers that I'll see have the ability and the desire to go with the flow. They know that things are going to change. They are prepared for that, and they try and um, expect it. They try and predict it a little bit, and they try, say they're working on, like a proposal, positioning, next quarter's plan or presenting data. These are the things that I see. Here's what's happening. It could go this way, or this way. These are the signals. Let's take this path, or this is the recommendation, right? Like leaders for high performers, like you need a strong opinion. You need to have that like direction that you're providing the leadership of the company. It doesn't have to be you need conviction around what you're doing. And so those, I see those traits often in high performers is like, a belief in what they're doing and why. And it changes as the environment changes, as the market changes, but they should be the one, like, it's not happening to them. The high performers don't feel like they're a victim of the environment. They see it coming because they're paying
Mm.
attention to signals, right? In marketing, they're like, oh yeah, I see this insight in my customer story. The report saying here customers are starting to talk about this. It's not a shock. If it's a shock, they're underperforming because they're not listening to the customer, right? And across the board, sales, RevOps, marketing, everyone should be listening to customer calls or reading customer insights or figuring out what's happening with the end user, because that's the whole point, right? And if it's a surprise, the direction's changed or the market's changed, or if you're not paying attention to what's happening in the company, you're missing something. If it's like, yeah, that to me is like above all else. Like, yes, you need emotional resilience. Startups are hard, but you need to want to get into startups to get there. So let's assume you wanted that. You're in there, you're sticking it out, you're trying to be a high performer, or you self-select out, and that's okay too. Tech is a special place, and small, big, they all have different feelings and stressors. But that signal, I think, it's not, it might happen fast, but it shouldn't be a surprise.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like I totally relate to that side of it. Like you almost need to be invested on like the macroeconomics of the business. And I love your point about like if you don't expect that your quarterly plan is gonna change by the end of the quarter, like what are you doing in tech or in startups? Like I always joke this idea of like why are we spending all these cycles planning when we know that the plan we just spent a week working on is not going to be the same thing in like 2 or 3 months from now. Like we had this
You
company
still need the
where
plan.
it wasn't even quarterly plans. Like a lot of companies that worked at, it was like quarterly planning, and that was fine. Like we did it ahead of time, knowing that like it was a pretty long horizon. Like stuff could change. But I was at a company once where like we did these like big like almost half of the month was spent planning for the next month, but then half of that next month was planning for the next month. And it was like counterintuitive because like we were spending all this time planning,
Yeah.
but we were doing it so often that there was a lot of new inputs into like the plans themselves. So like the
Not a
quarterly
lot of
side
doing.
is not a lot of doing though, and it was like an async company, a lot of written stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's tough, but like when I was working at that company, we were working in like it was during COVID, and we went through like this crazy period of like 3 years of uncertainty. And I feel like the topic we're chatting about right now is a different kind of uncertainty that we're dealing with. Like nowadays, we're dealing with like all kinds of different uncertainty with like AI blowing up and everything else happening around the world.
Yeah.
I'm curious to get your take on like how do you think we build confidence, like as leaders, but also folks on your team by doing, learning, and adjusting to these imperfect systems. Like sometimes my default with AI right now, especially, is to treat ambiguity as like something that needs to be eliminated before I act on it. Like before diving into AI agents and like Claude Code, I need to fully understand the mechanics, the use cases, and it's often this big blocker because it seems like a big thing that I have to do before I actually get into it. Something I'm trying to work on is to think of it as like an input and getting more comfortable with the idea of like, all right, here's a couple of smaller steps that I can take. Here's what I don't know, and here's what I'm going to try next. Like trying to lower the emotional
Mhm.
cost of potentially being wrong and doing something wrong. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think the answer varies slightly based on like an IC role versus a team lead
Yeah.
role versus someone whose goals are to be in management, depending on that. However, what does hold true is for sure breaking it down is critical, like you said. Like, you can never know everything before jumping in. And so I think part of everyone's sort of like growth as they become more seasoned professionals and or especially as someone if their goal is team leadership is to let go of that need to have everything learned before they start or know and feel comfortable with it before they jump in. I think that's like a life lesson in general. Like, you have to feel comfortable to not know what the end result is going to be. I think it comes back to like team safety and your manager, your leader, your company. Like, what's the threshold for mistakes? What's the threshold for trial and error, especially with new tools? I think most um, companies would like to think that they are a safe place to try new tools, all this, but you have to assess like the risk. And, if you're testing a new tool on a very like high, like alert spot in the business, you probably have to be more careful and not do it there. And you need that, less ambiguity around, a customer touch point or something like that, that might cause ripples down an organization. But there are, I think, places that you can test new and try new and not be scared to jump in. Um, from a leadership lens, like my view is that I want people on my team to be trying new things, to be exploring and pushing the boundaries of how things are done and not wait for me to ask or for leadership to say, hey, it's time to start using these tools. Like like
Hmm.
the team should be on the cutting and bleeding edge of what is possible and presenting sort of like not side of desk, but like little tests of these things and not waiting until they feel like 100% comfortable with everything to jump in there for sure. I think everyone needs to be comfortable with like nonlinear, very ambiguous in this new tool age. And also, it's so hard with remote and even in office work. Like, how do you learn new tools like this without dedicated space and time? That
Right.
is a fair concern, but also one that like there should be probably pair programming for non-techs,
Hmm.
non-developers, right? Like I believe that like just watching and seeing how someone operates through their day using new tools, new systems could be quite eye-opening. Whether that's like side by side physically or virtually, I think there are ways around helping people feel more comfortable with new tools, depending on your comfort level and all that. But even just how people, like I often think about this, forget AI, just like systems, how people are efficient, how they're productive. Like you can read a blog post or something overlaying how someone does it, but until you like see or feel, depending on your learning style or watch a YouTube video and do this, like, but doing it with your coworkers might help accelerate things. So I think there are just so many different tricks and tools that leaders can operate. And if you identify what that that tool is versus self-learning only as the only way
Hmm.
to get ahead, which often feels like you need this whole like time block. And who has that? Right? Like really, who has that? The other thing I'll say is as you, it's tangential, but as you grow in a leadership position, you do need to be, and like team management and your time gets more constrained and you're no longer in one topic, like the comfort around being able to complete things in shorter periods of time and context switch is so critical. So it's a bit on this side, but like, oh, I don't have like 2 hours to dive into this proposal or memo. Like, you're never going to get that. Sometimes you try like late at night or whenever early in the morning, some folks can do that. But if you don't have that time, like, what can you bang out in half an hour? What can you do? And then switch to another call, and then switch to another call. And you really have to work that muscle. People will say, oh, you got to time block this. Like, when you're running a team with 5 to 10 direct reports and let's call it 20 to 50 people or 150 depending on how big your org is and things like that, or 500 people under your org, you're not getting that dedicated deep work period during the day. Like, your job is to enable people, but how do you so you have to figure out how to protect that thinking time, that production time, that learning time, and carve it out. And sometimes you do just need to hunker down on a Saturday and like learn, but again, how many of us really have that unless you're, I don't know, I don't want to assume, but like
Don't
young,
have
single,
kids.
untethered, no children,
Yeah.
and all those things. So there is a space and time for that. And some of us might be envious of those folks still, but
Yeah.
you can still progress and learn and do all those things in different stages of your life, I think.
Yeah, it definitely saw myself in different parts of your answers based on where I was in life. Like, oh yeah, spending a Saturday diving into a new tool. Like, yeah, it's totally a
What
thing
fun.
before I was married with like 2 kids. Now it's just like, why? Why would I open my laptop on a Saturday to work on something unless it allows me to like spend more time at like dinner or in the evening? Like, it's all about trade-offs. But
For sure.
yeah, I love your answer. I feel like it is one of the reasons why even myself, like I'm in AI tools every day, but then I see someone post on LinkedIn about this new tool and I just like get a bit of FOMO and I'm like, ah, man, should I be dedicated more time to learn
Totally.
this and learn that? This episode was brought to you by Growth Bench. Everyone's racing to adopt AI, but AI is only as good as the data you feed it. If your customer profiles are fragmented, your events are inconsistent, and your tools can't agree on basic metrics, all you're doing is automating your mistakes. GrowthBench fixes all of that. As Twilio's highest tier consulting partner, they've completed over 400 CDP projects, building the clean, unified, real-time data infrastructure that makes AI actually work. They handle everything: data foundation, idea resolution, stack integration across 700 plus destinations, all connected, all trustworthy, all built to drive revenue. And they don't staff projects with junior folks who are learning on your budget. They embed senior practitioners directly into your team. Think of it as like adding a world-class Twilio expert to your org chart without the actual full-time hire. Companies like Vuori, Nutrafol, Dialpad trust GrowthBench to make their data foundations AI ready. Want to stop guessing and start growing? Visit growthbench.com/humans to book your free growth audit.
This episode is brought to you by Revenue Hero.
2 field forms. Complete context, instant scheduling. Finally, you get to pick all 3 without a single line of code. Introducing Native Enrichment by Revenue Hero. Plug in Clearbit, Crust Data, Apollo, or stack all 3. Enrich all the data you need instantly on submit. Stack your enrichment providers, waterfall your way to clarity. Determine qualification and meeting routing based on enriched information. Layer it onto your current distribution logic. Book more meetings with your qualified buyers. Get started at revenuehero.io.
I'm working with 2 vendors that are building in AI and they're asking advice on like the future of AI and Martech and like and build as someone who's knowledgeable because I'm chatting with all these experts, like not necessarily knowledgeable myself, but it's really crazy because like we almost need to be leading and you're probably dealing with this in your current position, like leading when the answers are temporary and certainty is almost an illusion when it comes to AI. Like who are we to say today that, this is the thing we should be doing with AI? Like things are going to change so fast. And you said this in your answer ahead of chatting too. Like, is your default first principles here? And if that is part of your answer, like, what does that mean exactly? Can you give us a couple of examples of how you think about this?
Yeah. So if we're talking about, certainty is an illusion and what tools to use and how to pick the best one and the promises of like, nirvana on the other side of this tech stack. I think it's important to temper everyone's expectations around those things. And I think everyone's been around the block knows that, right? Like nothing is a panacea, but you must you still need to dive in for new tools to advance the org. They don't have to be proven and like 100% tested and all those things to benefit you, but it's a cost benefit of how much better and where on your tool stack do you need something to solve a problem. And, definitely look past the shiny lights of a lot of these tools. There are a lot of unfounded promises. But that's not new. There's always been that. AI is the current, du jour, but like antidote, but it's always been like, oh, our tool can do all these things and we can do all these, like, it's really, that hasn't changed. So it's reading through the bullshit and sorry for swearing, and trying to, I guess, uncover what you're willing to risk things on and how you want to structure that. And then also making sure that everyone is on the same page on expectations around this like solution, and that, this should work for the next X period of time and it's going to solve this problem. But then we might have to shift again. And that's part of, I think, a pill that people don't love to swallow. They, might be living in a historic time of like, this tool is going to be great for 5-10 years. And that's not necessarily the case. And it can cause quite a bit of upheaval, but hopefully let's call it rip and replace of tools, it becomes more seamless, that it's not as much as an upheaval, that it's not as hard to move over or expand, grow, and trying to see through that before you dive into a new tool. Like, what is moving off this tool going to look like? And planning through that, I think, is incredibly valuable exercise to go through, because you have to assume that you're not married to a tool forever, despite the desire to want to be. So the exit plan, I think, is key. And then the expectation setting. I don't know if that answered part of the question, I think.
Yeah, definitely. What do you think is there a first principle that comes to mind that embodies like your answer there a little bit? Like, I know you said you were a big fan of constraints create clarity, judgment beats optimization. I feel like both of those are kind of like echoed a little bit in your answer.
Yeah, I mean, constraints create clarity for me is one of the most founding of the principles, foundational of the principles that I think guides a lot. It is helpful to operate everything you do within a constraint, whether that be time, money. Those are really great ones, really easy ones, but then also limitations around scale, team size, targets, all of those things create sort of that boundary of which you can operate, in which you can spend years assessing tools and going around in circles. At the end of the day, for most things, decisions, tools, all of it, you really just need someone to dive in. You need someone to defend the reason why. You need someone to have done like their due diligence and properly, but within the constraints you have, and just move, as opposed to letting things hold you back. And that might flow a little bit into judgment beats optimization, I think, in terms of, you can optimize up till like, the cows come home, but at the end of the day, like, you just really, again, have to jump in, make that call, and use what you have at your disposal to operate, or go get it, right? Like, go get what you don't have and figure that out. And so I think, again, the constraints sort of show you what you need. It doesn't mean to operate within like under or lower or worse. It's just pushes you further, I think. And those are pretty foundational for how I operate. Anyone on my team listening will be like, yep, I've heard those things before. So like, let's just go. But like, here are the boundaries, and here's why we're doing it. And let's make sure we're getting to the core of the problem, or the thing that we're trying to solve for.
One thing that I think becoming a leader and like growing up the ladder, so to speak, in your career, is that like you get to embody those first principles and like leadership strategies, and they evolve as you kind of like get your feet wet in that leadership world. Something that I've struggled with a lot in my career is the debate of trying to stay close to the work and being true to the operating mindset, knowing the lay of the land and tools and stuff like that, but then also investing time in like the one-on-one and like the leadership and building people, and like having that executive rapport with other folks. And like there's so many things that the world of leadership, when you're in a tech position, especially in marketing, you said that leaders should stay in the details as they grow into their leadership careers, even if they take on like a broader scope and their day-to-day is mostly with team members and a lot of other leaders. I think a lot of folks would disagree and say the opposite, like distance is necessary to scale, hiring experts and trusting them to do the work, delegating. What do leaders lose when they get too far from the work, and how can they stay connected without like becoming bottlenecks and having their team members feel like they're not being trusted, they're not getting like I felt that all the time, like on both sides. Like I get hired to do the work, and then like the person just wants to like still get their feet wet and stuff, and I feel like I'm being micromanaged a little bit. Like how do you deal with that? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think staying close to the work does not mean you don't delegate and have team members do the work. I think like, who do you want to learn from? Like, I want to learn from leaders who actually are good at the craft and know what they're talking about, right? Like that's who I want to learn from. So I want to be that person that isn't so out of touch with the weeds of marketing, sales, revenue. I want to be able to answer questions, have a valid opinion. And to me, that doesn't mean like That means staying close to the details. You need to know I think you really need to know what you're talking about if you're going to run any part of the revenue org, any part of any org, really. That might mean leaning in and leaning out. And I think sometimes it surprises people that I lean in sometimes in the weeds, but I think it's also appreciated in that it's not just a figurehead role. I'm not just here to delegate and tell people what to do and coach. I think you have to be able to coach from a position of empathy, understanding, acknowledgement. And if you're not willing to get in there and help move something across or help drive forward, our senior executive founders, owners, CEO, they're still in the weeds too. And I think it's amazing. I think, within reason, and everyone has their spots that they care a little bit more about than others. And you have to know those things, but doesn't mean I don't trust those team members to go and run. It's just, as an executive, I don't feel I can make recommendations. I can defend work. I can do my job unless I know what's happening in the business.
Yeah.
I need to have my finger on the pulse. And if I'm not in it, then I won't. Yeah, I think there's a degree there, and you obviously have to watch that, but then also you're on the line for the results. You're on the line for it. So you have to make sure that the output, the product is there. And there are some people who will learn quickly what's really important to what you're driving towards, what your goals are. And it certainly doesn't mean delegate and don't grow amazing leaders who are doing the same for their teams, right? I think it scales depending on the size of team you're in. In a team size where you're only one level, operating one level down, that might feel a little bit tough if if they're a new manager or having trouble letting go of the execution. But also, how do you learn otherwise?
Right.
I think that the people often feel it's a critique on their own knowledge, but I think people forget to take it as an opportunity of learning from someone, and co-working depends on their style. Obviously, co-working as partners on an output. And if it feels like that, then I can reflect on some teams that have really felt like that, where we're just working in lockstep and it's magic. And it doesn't feel like one person is micromanaging the other. We're just getting the best output because we are meshing our brains and our different styles. And my philosophy for hiring is to hire people that are better or smarter. I mean, everyone says that, but who have different sides of the brain, who can push me, who I can learn from, and I hope they can learn from me in other ways. And that's sort of what makes, I think, magical teams. I'm sure you can reflect on a few where that's felt that way, and the others where it hasn't because something is off balance. And so I think if you have that plus that special sauce, it can be really great.
Such a good answer. I totally agree with you. I love your point about empathy, on being in the weeds a little bit or enough to have that empathy for the folks that are doing the work and the execution more. My favorite bosses were the ones that were still logging into the automation tools, the customer engagement tools, and the dashboards, and they had empathy for the stuff that I built. When something was broken and I was doing a quick screen share and showing them how we fixed it, it was oh wow, that's a lot of work. That empathy doesn't come if you don't take that step to log into those tools again. They didn't underestimate the cost of adding just one more project or one more task when it came to doing that quarterly planning and oh yeah, Phil's got way more bandwidth. Let's throw him these 3 other projects. Oh no, Phil has to fix those 3 dashboards in Tableau. He was showing me the amount of time that works. That empathy only comes when you're at least somewhat close to the work. So yeah, totally
I think it
agree.
gains respect in sometimes, not always, but you don't want to always be you're marking something up, you're checking something, you're just adding comments. Sometimes it's nice to just screen share and co-work on something to solve through it. You mark this up and then okay, let's jam on this together. How do we actually solve for this? What can we do? How can I help you? I always want people to feel that they can do that with me and not be intimidating. I get that it can be intimidating to, jump on with the VP of marketing or whatnot, but my goal is for it not to be. And to do that with enough people on the team where it feels like a value add, where it's great, I'm so happy I got to jam together and we got to learn from each other and push this forward. And I think that's the expectation of the leadership around me, that they're all doing that. And so that's the culture, at least at WorkLeap. So It's pretty fun.
Yeah, I definitely see that as being a bit intimidating. Like, there's been a lot of roles in my career where it was very performative based. And so, like, the idea of an exec hopping on a screen share with me and watching me do my work, like, I would feel less like, oh, this is like a co-learning opportunity and more of like, this person is checking to see if I know my stuff. But I think that only comes with the culture, like you said.
It takes
And
time
like,
too.
I know you're a big fan of like figuring out where leadership is helping folks develop thinking, not just the output
Yes.
in this
Yes.
performative culture. And you've emphasized that like career growth is less about knowing things, how many things you know, how many things you can do, and more about learning how to think. I think that's super cool. And it reminds me of something one of my earliest CEOs said in my career, startup company. He said, knowledge expires faster than judgment. And I had a short teaching stint like 5 years ago, and I recently stumbled upon my marketing tech and automation slides, and I cringed so hard at like the lead scoring and nurturing and data content that I had on there. Like marketing changes so fast. You can't tie your value to what you know right now. How do you think leaders could adapt to developing thinking in their teams rather than just like pushing for more execution all the time? Like, give us some examples of things that we could
Yeah.
try this week, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, the people who we talked about earlier on, like, the strongest high performers are the ones that are adaptable, the ones that understand the difference. Like, we've grown up in the marketing world. How many times have you adapted? How many times have you changed? Like, you have to kind of be a chameleon as marketing changes. It's, again, if you go to first principles at the core, it's like the how, the why, like what we're doing hasn't changed, but the tools, the roadmap, like that has evolved. And it's like I always say this, like it's not the output, it's like the ingredients and the way you put them in and the order. Like baking is so technical, and marketing is kind of like that. Like you have only one set of ingredients and like maybe a few new ones get added here and there, but at the end of the day, it's like the same. Like, how do we get to this person to do this thing and buy this thing and renew this thing? Like it's very core there. So I think in terms of like leadership and growing leaders, it's pushing people. Like people want to stay in comfort. It's our natural inclination to be like, I know how to do this. I'm going to keep doing this. But I think recently, like on this team, like the folks who I've identified as really high performers, who I've been able to push a little bit to say, hey, like, what about this? Like, what about adding this to your portfolio? Have you thought about doing this? Like, I see their potential, and pushing them that way, they've really stepped up. Like, they're outstanding to see that, like, adaptability, the transferable skills are there. Like, they just need to learn and open up and know that it's safe to do that, and that their leader believes in that. And getting also their team leaders to do that for them. And hey, like, have you identified anyone on your team like open to taking on more, or is okay with this shift, or this business is changing? Like it is always changing. So who can we tap to help grow in that next level of change, that next stage? And it can feel like a whiplash. It can feel like ping pong, but at the end of the day, like it's the kind of that everywhere, like we just talked about. So for me, it's like spotting those patterns, those behaviors in folks that really are going to be those high performers are you. And as a leader, like you said, the knowledge expires faster than judgment, but the folks who have that good judgment to say, this is the right next move, or I'm going to jump on this and I'm going to come in and like, instead of just being the copywriter, I'm also going to film this day at this event. And then I'm going to create quick videos. And I'm going to turn them into YouTube spots. I'm going to figure out how to use the new tools for that. Like that's like real examples of like people's roles changing into tangential like areas that are expanding over the last couple of years that I've seen. That's one micro example, but like you have to just think about your folks and your team members as more like job descriptions are general, like, it's faster to help someone who's strong and smart adapt than to hire someone new. So if you have those key players who are high performers, like what are you waiting for? Don't limit what people can do, in my opinion. So give them the chance. And if they're strong, they will. And if they're not, they'll opt out, find someone else. But
Yeah. No, I
hopefully you
love
have
it.
people in your toolbox to help.
I love your point about judgment there. Like another thing that you said that was really interesting was this debate between like business judgment versus technical mastery. Like you said, there are great technical people and there's great business people, but there's very few who truly blend both of those things. And as AI is getting crazier and things are, changing all the time, like it's tempting to optimize for technical mastery alone. A lot of folks on the podcast do default to that because we are a bit more technical in nature. When I ask them this question about like business versus technical, How do you think about the balance between business judgment and technical skills for folks on your team? And for the folks that are like a bit more on the technical side that are listening right now, what advice do you have for them to become better at the business side? Curious your
Yeah.
thoughts there.
Okay, I'll start with the last part, I guess, is really listen to what people are
Mm,
asking of you, what people are asking in the rooms you're in. Say, you're in a weekly sales call with reporting in that, like, don't just present the report or throw it up or pass it on to lead. I mean, most people are probably doing this, but like, what are people trying to figure out? What are the patterns they're looking for? And try and anticipate those things. And then if that's not getting you far enough, like really attach yourself to a counterpart, to somebody who can help you there. Like that's the only way, I think. Can't just like magically turn your brain on in one way that it's not trained to, or the one way that you're like
yeah.
not as comfortable. Like you can push yourself, but really like I find when a more technical person and a really strong like business person connect and really like co-work, produce things together, that's where magic also really happens, right? They are pushing each other and they are enabling like the art of the possible together. And then they become, or you become like a linchpin for that organization, right? Like if you are helping a leader or a business person or a salesperson or whatever, answer questions, predict the future, as much as possible, see patterns, guide strategy, direction, all those things, then you have become a linchpin and people are going to start to come to you. So the technical know-how is critical, but it's not enough. Like you said, you have to know how to guide it. And you can get so lost in all the requests from all the people from across the org that you really need to have that, need to be able to discern what's critical, what the priority is, and not just listen, oh, this is the priority order. Like question that, right? Question why the backlog is the way it is and help push forward the most impactful, meaningful things, and bring up if you're not sure. Like, I think that's something that I see teams sort of stumble on a little bit. It's like, oh, this was reprioritized here and this is the new order. And there isn't enough pushback on like why and what's most important across the org versus the loudest or squeakiest wheel or the person closest to them that's prioritizing that list versus the impact. So I think it's optimizing for impact for the organization and thinking bigger. And I think that's how someone will grow in general, in leadership, in sales and marketing, is not just your own priority list, not just your own work. Oh, this is so important. This is my list of two, but like what's important for the business and not just you, and what's going to have the biggest impact. And that's, again, I think the difference between high performers and mid to low performers is being able to prioritize against the business goals and seeing a bigger picture, because it's not about you, right? It's just not. Like at the end of the day, like, a leader's job is to make it about you and help you grow, but your work is about the org. And so that, to me, I think is critical in spotting high performers and becoming that business technical linchpin.
One thing that, like a trait that I've seen in a lot of those folks, like I've worked with a rare breed of folks that are both doing both of those things. And one of them is confidence, but confidence while accepting the fact that you don't know everything, like being like having humility about it. And I know that's something you're really big on also in your leadership style. You actually said that you were like super skeptical of people that are super confident with their predictions about like the future of AI and buyers or platforms. And you also said that like operating with humility and the best information available today while assuming it is going to change. I feel like that's like the central theme of this episode here. Why do you think humility is such a critical leadership trait right now? And what risks do you see when confidence is outpacing reality?
Like I don't trust anyone who operates without the humility that goes along with the confidence that you need to operate, right? You need to have that courage, let's call it, not even confidence. You need to have the courage to act, but the humility to know that you're probably wrong or that this is going to change. And that, I think those two combined lets you make bets, move, and not be stalled. Like you really need that courage and that, like that willingness to move, but you need to be humble enough to share all of the potential downfalls that are coming out, right? In terms of like, nobody knows where the things are going to go. We can do our best to predict, like there are futurists, right? I don't know how they get that, like how they become that, but they're magical, I guess. But like there is a way, obviously they're brilliant and have much better intelligence than I do, but we don't often have those in our organizations, right? And so we can only operate with the info that we have and the amount of reading that one can do in a 24-hour or 48-hour period, right? Like I read so many different newsletters from different places, but how much information can you take on? And so we can operate only with those things. And so I think as a leader, my job is to say, I want you to move fast. I want you to do these things with a level of humility that you check to make sure you're not going to make a massive mistake at the same time, right? Like you need to know, you need to have a little bit of fear around failure so that you are like stopping yourself from moving in certain ways and catching yourself and double checking and crossing your eyes and crossing your T's and dotting your I's and doing all that. And so it's that like the scales have to balance a little bit to win. I think founders probably are a little bit higher on the like confidence side and for good reason, right? But I think operating within an org, you need to have a little bit more balance to not make everything go crash and burn, right? Like there's different, like you can have a different level of each of those things and different roles in the business. And CFOs probably have a little bit more, a little bit more of the checks and balances. You need to have both so that you're balanced.
Yeah, totally agree. Love your answer there, Jenna. We have one question that we ask everyone on the show. You're a VP of marketing, team leader. You're also top 100 women in Canada, both Canadian. Love having double Canadians on the show. Outside of work, you're also a mother of 3, as we were chatting about before recording. You also volunteer on a bunch of different boards. One question we ask everyone is, how do you decide what deserves your energy at any given moment? And what's your personal system for staying aligned with what actually makes you happy?
It's definitely changed over the years. Once I had kids, I think it was a slow realization of like, I can only get to so many things in the day. And so I would say currently, like, how do I operate on that is what is the most important, what are the most important things that need to happen and what can slip? So sometimes that means my personal inbox will go unattended for quite some time. Sometimes that means like I used to be on top of all my emails, on top of all the responses, like pre-kids Jenna. But post-kid Jenna, really like ruthless prioritization. I really do try and give back in terms of like time and mentoring and coaching folks that reach out and things like that, but within reason. Like I also am human and a mom of 3 and all those things. And so I try to balance, like balance is the, never happens, but I try and manage what's the most important. What are the most important things that need to happen for that day? And some things just stop being as important. I really enjoy the volunteer work that I do. And that keeps me happy and motivated and, getting out there in the world and not just living in my remote work and my like family life, is fulfilling, but it's nice to, step out of the house for a little bit sometimes. So for me, that's like joy is seeing people and talking to people and interacting with people. That for me keeps me balanced, and getting out, exercising, trying to fit that in there and eating well and like keeping sort of that. But I have family time and I really love hosting. I really love bringing people together and building community. So that's been a theme over my career. Sometimes I'll get in a mood and a little bit of like, oh, I wish I was out there more, doing more. And then I have to remember that I do have 3 little kids under 6. And it's not all possible all the time at the same time, and coming to terms with that. Like, happiness is this illusion a little bit. I'm really content. And I think being content with like what you have and being very grateful, this maybe got more deep than you wanted, but like being very grateful and appreciating like health and like my kids and all the things around me, like on a daily basis, and reflecting on that, as cheesy as that sounds, like keeps me like, okay, maybe not those other things aren't as important, or why are they? And like understanding that they are to me as well, but reflecting and really trying to like live in that joy, or finding the joys, the little things, like the cute opportunities I can be a part of right now and things like that when I can. And I'll say one other thing is living in walking distance from my kids' school when the weather is not -30.
Nice.
It's also like the little joy in every day of walking the kids to school is like such a great way to start the day. So I'm counting down the days until it's nice enough to do that. But yeah, those are some of the things that keep me happy and staying aligned and all that. And I'm sure my answer will be different. as the years go. But for now, that's what it is.
That's really cool hack. Being walking distance to school and daycare. Yeah, for folks that are in the US listening to hear you say -30, like what the heck, -30
Yeah.
Fahrenheit, -30 Celsius.
Celsius, yes.
It's still super crazy. But yeah, I love that answer, Jenna. The whole point is going a little bit deep there. So I love the self-reflection there. Like last question before I let
Yeah.
you go. What's a belief that you held strongly earlier in your career that, now 15 years in, you look back and you're just like, yeah, young, ambitious Jenna was a bit silly to think that.
I was in a rush. I was in a big rush when I don't know if it's a belief, but I was in a rush to like get there. And I think I wish I'd had more mentors that would have said to me, like, slow down, sit in this moment. I don't know if I would have listened, but I certainly never heard that really. So looking back, I wished a few more people had said to me, hey, like, your career is long and you'll get there and all those things. That being said, like, I am who I am and I'm in a rush generally. So maybe that's just part of my DNA. But I think most people can benefit from like sit in it, don't be in a rush, like have a strong sense of urgency. Don't get me wrong, but that the career journey is long and that you'll go around in many different ways. So that finding that balance between those two things, don't be complacent, but also, don't be in a rush necessarily. So
very cool.
Someone should have told me that more.
Nice stroke of mindfulness in your answer there, like sitting in the moment instead of thinking of the next thing I have to do. And
I need to still tell myself that. So
yes, me too. Favorite book that you've read, fiction, nonfiction, before I let you go?
Nonfiction, it's really stuck with me. It's called Fall and Rise, the story, like real life recounting of 9/11. It's an amazing read. And then I'm a Harry Potter fan on the fiction side. Will always be.
Nice.
I read a lot of fiction now, but I'll always be a Potterhead. But that Fall and Rise book is amazing. It's always my number one recommendation for people. It's like reading a movie. It was that gripping and heart wrenching, obviously.
Very cool. All right, we'll share that out to folks. Jenna, thank you so much for your time today. This is super, super fun. Really appreciate it.
It was awesome. Thanks. Thank you for having me, Phil.